What was your childhood like, and how is that similar or different than your kids?
This is one of the first times he said this. He's like, Dad, it is annoying to me right now how right you are.
A lot of people have mentioned not wanting to pass on the stereotypical, maybe distant emotionally, father-child experience. Have you talked to friends about that?
One day he's cutting my hair and he's like, they look at you through the mirror, and he's looking at me through the mirror and he goes, wow, you're getting to be a handsome boy. You have a girlfriend. And my mom's in the waiting area, and I was like, no, I don't have a girlfriend. My mother says he doesn't like girls. And Giorgio, the barber, he looks at me through the window and he goes, like, are you gay?
What's it like to be an older dad? Like, what's kind of your perception of what that means?
Welcome to Dad Pod. I'm Mike.
And I'm Luke. We're friends here in Madison, and we both have kids. And at least for us, becoming a dad has been transformational. We talk to all sorts of dads in all sorts of situations to learn from their unique challenges, lessons, and evolutions. The goal is simple: learn from each other to become better dads.
If you dig it, please find us on Apple or Spotify and click follow. That single click helps put us in front of more dads, which Luke would really appreciate.
All right, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Dad Pod. Very excited to introduce to you today our guest, Andy Raskin. Andy helps people tell stories. He helped me figure out what our story was, and he's done it with dozens of other companies too. He is one of the best. I remember meeting Andy for the first time and being a bit nervous, which turned out to be an appropriate emotion. Part of his gift is telling CEOs and founders how it actually is. I am so excited and happy to have Andy on the podcast today to go deep into another area of his life as a father. Andy, welcome to the pod.
Thanks so much, Luke. I didn't mean to make you nervous when we met at first. That wasn't part of my plan. Sorry.
Just your aura. It's a strong aura. But to jump in, what was your childhood like, and how is that similar or different than your kids?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My dad had been in the Army. He was like ROTC. So he was from Brooklyn also, but he was like down in Georgia for, at Fort Benning. I think a lot of Army folks go to, and that's where I was born. But then we quickly came back to Brooklyn. My dad was like, could do everything. Like, any skill. The big thing is like learning how to tie knots. Like that was manhood being passed down in our family, is how to tie a bowline,
I was just going to ask you. A nice bowline. Oof.
Yeah. So I guess some families like hunting or something. This is, in my family, it was knots. Part of that is my grandfather started sailing. So he basically took a canoe and like,
wow, somehow
not glued, but somehow attached an oar to it as a mast, and like got a piece of cloth and made a sail. And it went from that to like he actually like built a boat. And then by the time I came along, my dad had been sailing a long time. So
working Luke into a lather.
Oh yeah,
frothy lather with all this sailing talk.
Oh yeah, I didn't know.
Fellow sailor.
You had that. Like, did you grow up sailing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing gets me going like a nice bowline.
Okay. All right. Good. So I noticed you weren't confused when I started bringing up those knot terms. Yeah. I mean, it was a little much for me. Like my dad was so into it that it was like a little bit like I kind of wanted to hang out at home with my friends. A little more than just hang out with my parents on their very small sailboat. And all, we were at a quote unquote yacht club, but it was. This was in Brooklyn, so it was really just it sounds a very fancy term for what was basically a kind of a cement area with a soda machine. And
so like the Kiwanis Canal?
It was Sheepshead Bay, which is not...
Love
not
Sheepshead Bay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was great. Like a lot of party fishing boats and all that stuff. But my dad was like really... he's in charge, like especially when he's on the boat. I actually just went sailing with him the other day. He still races. He's 82.
Oh, wow.
And he races several different races during the week. And I went in with his crew because we were visiting for the first time in probably like 20 years. And man, he is like a taskmaster on the boat. And that's how he was kind of in life too. You know, he came from the Army. He was disciplined. I wouldn't say like I was treated like like I was in boot camp or anything like that. But he wasn't super emotional and was all kind of like by the book. That was something I really wanted to change, I think, with my son. I'm an older dad. I had my son when I was 47. I'm 59 now. So he's 12. And I think there's ups and downsides to being an older dad. And one of the, I think, upside for me is I don't think I could have nearly been as good a dad as a younger person. That's not to say for everybody, just for me personally. Like,
Right.
I think I would have messed it up really badly, or certainly not done as good a job as I think I'm doing now. I think I'm doing okay. So, in fact, this morning I actually had a great dad moment this morning. So, do you have like a segment here? Great dad moment.
We can. It's being
maybe
birthed
that's
before our eyes.
Yeah. So my son started middle school last year, so he's in 7th grade now. And they have a debate team. And at first he was like, oh, yeah, that's something I'd be interested in doing. But then he gets intimidated pretty easily. And, there's other kids who've been doing it for a while. And he's like, oh, I won't be as good as them. And, he's kind of shying away from that. So it's a new year starting. And I said, hey, have you heard about the debate? Have they mentioned anything about that yet? He said, no. And I said, well, when they do, what are you thinking? And he's like, well, I don't think I'd be as good as all those other people. And I said, well, I think you'd be really great at it. And then he starts telling me, well, I don't think I would because of this, this, and this. And here's the moment. I said, this is evident. You're debating me right now about why you shouldn't be on the team. And, you're doing a great job at it. You're like pointing out why my argument is flawed and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, this is one of the first times he said this. He's like, Dad, it is annoying to me right now how right you are. He never said something like that before. So I don't know if we're really going to get him to go on, to the debate team or not. But I think I got a foot in the door.
There you go.
Yeah.
So when you go back and you keep telling that story about your dad, it sounded like there are some of the maybe more stoic kind of military style task mastery. That was some of the stuff sounds like you didn't want to pass on.
Yeah.
Were there any things from your childhood that you really did?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is it's great that my dad is one of the benefits of having young parents, I guess, which I do. So they had me when they were 22.
Oh wow.
So one of the benefits of that is they're still around if you're going to be starting late, and it's really been great to see my son develop a relationship with my dad. My dad, he's active in his way, so he does a lot of sailing, but he's also walking a lot. He'll walk. He did this walk across Long Island a few years ago,
wow.
where that's where they live. So it's not at one time, but he has like all these maps that kind of connect different routes. So by the end, you've walked across. My dad's really into cooking, and that's something I'm really into. And it's interesting, like when I try to do cooking with my son, he's a little bit resistant. But when we go to my parents' and my dad does, he's really in there with my dad.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's really fun to see that and kind of sense of humor. Like my dad has although he's not. I said stoic, but he's not all that. And I think I see my son developing that through him.
A lot of people have mentioned not wanting to pass on the stereotypical, maybe distant emotionally, father-child experience. Have you talked to friends about that? Because I've heard a number of people talk about it here in this context, but also just personally in personal conversations. And I'm wondering if it's the sort of peer group bubble that I'm in, or if there's a larger shift that's happening. And I'm just curious what your experience, if you've poked at that at all.
Yeah. I don't think I've talk specifically about that one. I mean, I think in a way, it's probably like an evergreen thing. It's like, what are the thing you remember from your childhood that sucked? Oh, it was when there were rules and they were, tough on me. And, oh, I want to be a friend to my kid and like not be, but of course you learn like it can't be all that either because you have to be tough sometimes. One of the things my dad did, both my parents did was hit me, so a lot of spanking. And that was absolutely something that I would would determine never to do with my son. And there have been times I wanted to, like, wow, it would have been nice if I was back then. And, I've had a lot of talks with my parents about it. They've apologized about it. When I was born, my dad, I guess this was a thing that parents were taught that if the baby's crying, like shake the baby. Like vigorously. This is a thing. There's even a thing called shaken baby syndrome. I don't think I have that, but it's like babies get really like injured from this, and obviously it's not something that's taught anymore. But these are things my parents did that obviously I'm not going to do.
How did you approach that conversation with them?
With my parents?
Yeah.
God, I think it really started with, well, I remember a moment when I turned, it was somewhere around when I was 14 or 15 and I had a big growth spurt and my mom went to hit me and I was physically big enough now to stop it, to say, no, this isn't going to happen. But in terms of actually dealing with it, therapy over the years started to talk about it and then I'd bring it up with them and very difficult because it brings out a lot of guilt for them and they kind of feel like, hey, that was the way it was back then. Kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you see the show Hacks. I really enjoy the show Hacks. It's about this older female comedian who's kind of washed up and gets paired with a young comedian who's kind of on her way up and the two hate each other at first, but then eventually they partner and do really well. In one of the episodes, the Hacks, the older one, like old videos of her act go viral, and it's some jokes that would not be appropriate today. Right. Even though most of her act is like lots of feminist stuff and lots of positive, good things. And so she's like, hey, that's how they did it. That was it back then. Like, don't hold me accountable. And so in the show, she comes to terms with that. But and I think my parents have too. But it took a while for that.
If you were to think about the context of your child again, and think about the context of your kid's childhood, I'm interested if you reflect on obviously geography is quite different. I don't know if the economic or socioeconomic context is different. But are there any of these other big areas that you think of your childhood and you look at your kid and you're kind of like, how do I deal with this?
Well, on the surface, there's my son, when we go back to visit my family in New York, he just constantly makes fun of their accents, and they have really strong accents. Mine kind of flares up when I hang around them a little bit, but I've mostly lost it.
That's awesome.
But he's like, oh yeah, give me some water over there. And then he'll make fun of them. I think a big one actually is his openness and sort of attitude around sex. And this is a interesting one. So my dad, this is another thing I wanted to change. So when I was around 11 or 12, like his age, my dad, it's sort of clear I was kind of developing, going through puberty, and my mother must have told my dad, you got to give him the talk, and he comes in to my room. I remember very clearly I was doing Hebrew school homework, which was the last thing I ever wanted. Like I hated, this is the most hated thing, but I'd rather be doing my Hebrew school homework than hearing my dad talk about this stuff. So I was like, Dad, I gotta do this. He's like, yeah, I know. We just got to talk about this. Like, Dad, I remember I was making a family tree, and I was like, Dad, I got to do this family tree, man. I guess I can't talk to you about it. He's like, no, you got to put that aside. But the structure of his talk was essentially a vocabulary lesson. So it was like, hey, so, it seems you're developing. You might be hearing some words that your friends might be throwing around that you might not know what they mean. And, I just want to check in, do you know what they mean? And I was like, Dad, I got to do the homework. He's like, no, like, for instance, jerk off. Do you know what that means? I was like, yeah, I know what that means. I had no idea what it meant, but like, I don't want to hear about it from you. Then I remember he said, or for instance, like the word bag. I was like, no, I never heard bag. And I guess around that time when my dad was growing up, that was some word for like
He's
swear
bringing
words.
his slang.
His slang from when he was a kid, and so already it was out of date. And there was no emotional part of it of like, oh, how do you feel about girls? Like nothing about that. To be fair, I was very like the fact that I was attracted to girls, which I was already. I was very embarrassed about it. Like all kids are, I think, a little bit, but I was really like, I didn't admit to my parents that I liked girls until I was getting a haircut. So we went to this barber in near my house. There's this Italian guy from Italy with like this open shirt with like hair like billowing out chest hair billowing out of the shirt, and he had like the waiting area was strewn with Penthouse magazines, and I remember one day he's cutting my hair and he's like, they look at you through the mirror, and he's looking at me through the mirror and he goes, wow, you're getting to be a handsome boy. You have a girlfriend. And my mom's in the waiting area, and I was like, no, I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend. And my mother says he doesn't like girls. And Giorgio, the barber, he looks at me through the window and he goes, like, are you gay? And if I was gay, there was nothing wrong with that. But
was he asking you basically quietly?
I don't think, yeah, that was beyond my understanding. I don't think so. Anyway, I was so embarrassed that I said, Mom, I like girls. And she's like, you do? I was kind of surprised. Like, I thought maybe she knew I was kind of hiding it. But, I don't think she thought I liked boys. I think she just thought I was, not quite there yet. But anyway, it took me, so I was very, like, hiding of that. And so it must not have been easy for my dad. I must have been, like, quite, I want to do this homework. I don't want to talk about that. I don't like girls, whatever.
Do you think like he walked out of there and like went to your mom and she's like, did you tell him about the bags? He said, yes, I told him about the bags.
I'm guessing my mom did not know about bags either. This sounds like something my dad picked up in high school or something. Yeah.
Like, I totally crushed it.
Yeah. But anyway, so I wanted to do that very differently with my son. And in his 5th grade, they had puberty education. They don't call it sex ed until like 7th or later, but maybe have this similar where you are. And unfortunately, the school district, the teachers went on strike right at the time they were going to do this class. So they didn't do the class. But a friend of ours recommended this online class from Stanford Hospital, and it turned out to be really good. It was like several weeks. You have to do it with one parent and one child. They ask you to just choose one of the parents, and he chose me to do it with. And
is it live?
It's part live and part videos. So like it'll be a live kind of curator MC, and then they'll say, oh, let's take a video. And then they'll say, oh, are there questions? And people submit their questions. And his big question was, when am I going to have cum? That was the big question. Because he had heard of it. He's like, and you can imagine, like, he's like, how is this going to happen? And they didn't answer it.
Less distracted by his Hebrew homework, it seems.
Yeah. He's out there. Like he talks about, he mostly does it to like get a rise out of us. I think he'll use words that he hears about in class or whatever. But yeah, he seems to have no shame about it. He's always asking, when's this going to happen for me? And he doesn't talk about girls much, or really any interest in any people that way, like romantic interest, but sort of how the body's developing, I think, and sex in general, he seems to be kind of interested.
That brings up one of the really interesting differences, certainly for us parents today, which is you're not constrained geographically, but you're not constrained by geography for the resources that you can access.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing, and I had never thought about going, looking online for a class like that.
Yeah, me neither.
You know what I mean?
Me neither. Yeah. If your parents grew up in a closed New York community that used the word bag, you're not limited to just that input.
You can go beyond that. Your dad and Giorgio in terms of.
Well, and the you can make resources available to the child, well as resources for you to learn. Because it made me think, I wonder what in Madison resources are available to parents who are at that stage. I have a 2-year-old, so at least a few more years until I have to face that music.
Yeah. One thing that happened when my son was younger, not really directly about this, but was around pretty young, he started coming home cursing. Like when he'd get mad, around 5 or 6 years old, he was saying fuck. I don't know, is this a clean podcast or?
Certainly not this one.
Yeah, I think we're late to ask that question, but no, you're good.
It just was a little weird. Like he's this young little, so we're like, you can't say that and whatever, and you just say it more, And so we went to this. We did like one little hour consultation with some kind of family, I don't know, not therapist, but some kind of coach or something, and the person said, he's doing it to get a rise out of you. Why don't you just pretend like it's nothing, and yeah, okay, whatever. And we did that, and it stopped. We didn't hear it anymore. And then a few years later, we moved to a new school, and we got a call. Now he's in 2nd grade, and we get a call from the teacher, and the teacher's like, hey, just want to let you know, your son was using a curse word in class today. And when I asked him about it, he said that in your family, that's okay. That, your family, like, words are okay. And I just want to let you know that in our school district, that is not so it was like, it kind of backfired on us that now we have this reputation as this, like, foul-mouthed family.
There's a classic story in my
to the
family.
School district.
When I was in kindergarten or 1st grade or something, and filling out some little questionnaire thing, that they have kids do, and I told I filled it out that our favorite family TV show was The Simpsons. Which at that time was completely inappropriate for a 5-year-old or 6-year-old to be watching, and we also never watched it. It was maybe on randomly once, and my mom was horrified that I'm telling. Number one, it's a lie, and she's put in all this work, and then I'm telling the teachers that we watch The Simpsons every night.
One of the things you mentioned, Andy, is especially when you compare yourself to your parents. You I think you said they were 22 when you were born. You waited. I think you said you were 47 when you had
almost like skipping a generation.
What is that like? What's it like to be an older dad? Like, what's kind of your perception of what that means?
Yeah, well, I said already, like some things about it is like, just for me personally, it just had to be this way. Like there was some maturization experiences I needed to have before I could do that. I got married just a couple of years for the first time, a couple of years before that. So that was a little bit late too, relative to the average. But, like for instance, in school at PTA meetings, sometimes I wonder if people think I'm his grandfather, and it's a little bit embarrassing to me sometimes that I'm like so old compared to other kids. Luckily, I'm usually not the oldest. I feel like So I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and somehow this area I think is like the land of old dads.
Yes.
It's where men go to, or I don't know if just men, but at least men go to not do this until later. So there's definitely people who are older than me, but I'm certainly one of the oldest, and so like a PTA meeting or like the dad's club or something, I'll go out there and everyone's quite a bit younger. I feel like I'm pretty active and stuff like that. So it's not like I feel like I'm old that way, but I just wonder sometimes. I think like, who's this old guy who's here? Like what's his?
Did you experience any challenges trying to relate to classmates' parents or anything like that?
Because of my age, you mean?
Yeah, just being
Yeah.
Whether it's age or like you said, you've had a few more reps through life also.
Yeah.
And like from your perspective, you could be dealing with like some young clowns.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious
Well-
if that's produced any challenges or benefits.
I don't think I think of any of the people, the other parents as young clowns, but they are going through things that, like, couples are divorcing. They're of that age. There's that stuff kind of going on. Knock wood. I don't see that. I don't see that for us. So there's like a kind of stability, I think, that comes after. This is the kind of thing you say, and then it's like repeated like 3 years later when your divorce is published. Like that the celebrity interview. Oh, like we're so tight, so much better than my old relationship. Take it with a grain of salt, but I really feel that more like stability. And for instance, like there are divorced parents of some of his friends where they weren't divorced at first, and I think we're a big support to the parents, like to those parents as a kind of stability of the friend's kid, and then also for us, for them. That's one of the ways that there was also, I don't know if this is related, but in my son's elementary school, when he was in, I think, 4th grade, he had a classmate who died. And I never learned the circumstances, but I think it was some kind of accident. The kid was not sick or anything like that. And my wife and I went over to the house and just rang the bell and said that we're thinking about them and, this kind of stuff. And this woman wound up writing a book about the experience, and she mentioned me and my wife coming to the door and what that meant for her. She said nobody else did that. And in this case, I think it was, I'll credit my wife's kind of EQ about this. Really difficult to go, like, what do you say? But maybe that's some experience of like, hey, you gotta go there and be there for that person. My son wasn't especially friends with this kid. We didn't know the family, but they were in our community, and I think maybe that's something that maybe came with my more experience.
What was it like? So I think you've talked quite a bit about your personal transformation up to the point, kind of a lot of your adult experience. What shifted for you when you had your kid for the first time?
Well, first of all, is intense partnership with my wife.
Yeah.
I think we already had established a pretty good base for that, but just realizing, like, wow, we're both into this, and we're like, it really solidified that partnership. Then I think as he started, at the beginning, it's like all the normal feel, like, wow, this is the greatest. Blah, blah, blah.
The sack of skin.
Yeah. Yeah. First he's kind of weird looking. Oh, now he's really cute. And, and then pretty early on, I mentioned that he has this thing where he'll get kind of intimidated pretty quickly. That really, in my mind, was happening kind of early. Like, well, it's just, or maybe it's just his choices. Like, around 3 years old, kids are starting to play like soccer tots, and we would sign him up for soccer tots, and he would like run away. And when a couple of years older, like they're playing soccer and he's playing, but there are some kids who are like really getting in the scrum and getting in there, and he like seems to not want to get hurt, and he's running around a little bit, but he's not really getting in there. And I was, sports was never like I was never a jock or anything like that, but it was a big part of how I related to other boys, like made friendships and developed them. That playing sports was just a lot of the time with my friends, but it was like football in the street. It was Brooklyn, so football in the street, baseball, everything in the street, basketball, everything. Yeah, baseball in the street, punch ball in the street, and he's not developing that way. And I remember other parents, the pride they had, oh, my son scored the goal, whatever, and really feeling I didn't think I'd be that guy. I didn't think I'd be that dad who was like, oh, my son's got to be a great athlete. And I didn't even he doesn't I don't think I ever thought he had to be a great athlete, but it was hard for me that he wasn't like that. He wasn't into those things that I was into. And my wife was totally like, she didn't care. It's like, yeah,
Right.
okay, he'll choose what he wants. But it had something for me. And that was obviously my issue. Like, I had to get over that. And, it's still there. Like, he wound up getting really into ping pong. So
Ping pong's great.
yeah. And I don't know if you watch the Olympics, like it can get pretty
Live ping pong is incredible.
It's incredible, right? Yeah. So yeah, we were on vacation once, and there was a ping pong table, and it rained like the whole time. So we wound up playing inside, and we played ping pong. We came back and found this ping pong gym nearby, and so he's been taking lessons and really into it. And he does a couple of other. He did skateboarding for a while and some martial arts. But like heavy sports, that's just not going to be his thing, or at least that's the way it seems right now. And
Yeah.
it's a bigger challenge for me than I thought it would be.
I can really relate with that. Sports were a big part of my life growing up, and definitely part of my identity through the middle school and high school years. Yeah. And hockey in particular is one of my sources of true joy. It is some of my happiest moments are kind of those blissful moments out on the ice. And I remember like the first time we took Zeke, my oldest, he's now 6, to the rink to do like learn to skate. And he was just like not into it. And he cried, and he was like, I don't like being cold. And then it didn't really change the second time and the third time and the fourth time. And it was like a way bigger deal for me than I thought. And to your point, I don't know.
It's such a big deal.
What made it such a big deal?
Yeah.
I think, it's a great question. I think it was one of those where at first I had just never even thought about it. It was just like, oh, this is a big part of my life and I love it. Of course my kids are.
You just think it'll be obvious.
Of course they're going to love it. And then it opened up this whole question that I think a lot of men and myself definitely deal with, which is like, where on the spectrum of telling my kid what to do versus, kind of standing next to them or beside them as they figure out what they want to do, where do I actually fall on this? And where do I naturally fall on it versus where do I want to fall on it?
Yeah.
And, it's just a big deal. And I think sports is just one of those things that is so core to so many men's identities. I think it's a deeper question than I think we give it credit to oftentimes.
And I think this is the fundamental challenge of my fatherhood, is how much to, like what you said, is like how much to kind of push and how much not to push.
Right.
And I don't know that's probably not every central challenge of every fatherhood, but it feels like it for me. Like, pushing him into sports, like it just wasn't going to be his thing really, at least the traditional kind of team sports like that. But then music was a big part of my life. So I started playing music when I was like his age, actually, 11 or 12. And I was put into the the concert band of the junior high school, and he asked everybody, like, what do you want to play? And I was like, I don't get, I had tried piano. I hated practicing. The only reason I stayed in the class is because my school had a rule that you had to do some kind of music, and if you dropped out of the band, you had to be in chorus. And I was like, no way of that. No way I'm doing that. So you had the same thing, Mike?
Similar, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't care. So the teacher said, okay, sit down for a surprise. And he brought out this trombone, which I had never seen before. But it was like, okay, that's a kind of weird looking thing. And I wound up, you know, I wasn't a professional musician, but I played it in high school. I played it in like traveling orchestras. I got to travel a lot of places in the world that no way I would have gone to except with this orchestra in college. And then in my adult life, I've been in a lot of different bands over the years. Just played a gig with a friend.
Really?
One in many years.
Wow.
Yeah, for a friend who's like a professional musician, and he was kind of encouraging me to get back. And so he had a little like Christmas gig at a party, so we were like the background music.
That's awesome.
So it felt pretty safe, so I went and did it. You know, that was something it was such a great experience for me, and I just wanted him to maybe have that. And so when in his middle school they have band, and he got put into it, and he was like, I want to drop out because all these other kids know how to read music and I don't know how to read music.
Totally.
And I'm way behind everybody. You know, I come from this perspective like, oh my God, you're just like, you have to be in like the mindset of him, which is like, they're all professionals now, even though they're in 7th grade, right? Or 6th grade at the time. And I really encouraged him to stay with it. And little by little, like he started getting into it. Oh, and now it used to be like if I limited him, like when his video game time was up, he'd sort of be lost of what to do. And now he just goes and plays the bass. He chose cool. Electric bass, so he plays bass. And then this summer he did a day camp where he was like in a like they were playing like Nirvana kind of stuff, Green Day, in this band. And so he's really having fun with it. And you know, that's a place where we did push him a little bit, and I think he's very glad that we did.
I think that's a great question, regardless of the specific activity, but where's the balance in pushing them through a little bit of the friction? You know, I have this, rightly or wrongly, this conception that kids like to quit fast, and there's sort of these different quit points where if you can, at a certain point, it becomes a real quit. Like, hey, it's just not a fit.
Yeah.
And at other times, it's hard, and will mom and dad let me bail to do something easier? Yeah. And how do you figure out where those points are? Yeah. I think about it for reading. For me, you know, I want to do everything I can to build a internal drive for reading. And how do you do that?
Yeah.
You know,
one thing I found was really successful with the bass was, I think my initial sense is like, you know, I should be giving him, you know, lessons about, hey, you should do this, or oh, you're doing that wrong, do this. No, doing that wrong. It's at the beginning, you know, it's just praise. So one thing I started doing is like whenever he would play something that I could tell, I was like, nice. And I mean, sometimes like it's not me even thinking to do that. It's just like, wow, you're playing the bass line you're playing the bass line to Day Tripper as fast as they're playing it, and like along with the Beatles, like at that speed, like that's pretty good. And I can tell he's very proud of it. Like he's really gets a sense of that.
That's cool.
That I'm not making it up. Like I really like it. And when I hear him play something wrong or whatever, I just remember, you know, okay, I remember practicing. Like it's just totally, that's part of it. Like who cares? You know, just be the champion for that.
Do you wonder, or do you have a sense if you playing music has had a significant impact on his likelihood? Like, do you see a through line there at all?
Yeah, I mean, so like this gig that I went to, like he came and watched,
Oh,
and
cool.
I think he was proud, that I was doing that. He'll ask me questions about, oh, when you were my age, were you able to read this kind of music, or
Oh,
um,
interesting.
it helps him kind of normalize. And yeah, I'll always tell me, oh yeah, when I was that age, I didn't know how to do that or this or that, or like I
Right.
wasn't playing Day Tripper. Not that anybody really plays Day Tripper on the trombone, but yeah. Uh,
This is not a joke. The trombone player was so highly regarded in my high school. He would play Iron Man randomly at football games, and he was a legend
he
because
was
of
the
it.
guy. Yeah,
He was
yeah.
God.
He was also an offensive lineman, so he
Oh
would come
wow,
out at halftime
wow,
in his uniform
yeah,
and play.
wow. That's you got to be quite a person to be like the man on trombone. So
Universally
yeah, yeah,
beloved by
yeah.
all
That's
600
amazing.
members of my class.
Wow.
It
Where did
was
you go to school?
in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a legit question. What else were they excited about? I think is
Hey, 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 hey.
one of the things you mentioned a couple times, and I think it might be interesting to dive into it is, you got married late, you had a kid late, but how has having your child impacted your relationship with your wife when you look at your partnership?
Like I said earlier, I think the biggest thing was like this sense of being a team together in
Right.
this. Like really feels that very strongly. Again, this is like what the celebrities say before the big breakup
Right.
tape, but it does feel that way. We approach a lot of situations from very different angles. So, like with the sports, like she's like, who cares? Yeah, he doesn't like playing soccer. Who cares? He'll do something else. And it's not that simple for me.
How do you merge though or collaborate successfully coming from those
Yeah.
different viewpoints?
I think we've come up with some good ways of talking to each other around these things. Yeah, sometimes it's a source of a fight, but eventually, like I think we got pretty good at coming up with a plan together that we would both sign on to. And I know it's almost like one of us becomes like the adult in the room. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's her, maybe usually her, and um, and just says like, okay, well, what if we do this, this, and this, and we kind of negotiate it out and just agree we're gonna try to have a solid front to him. I think therapy for both of us has helped quite a bit.
Are there any methodologies or anything? Because, for example, I found the book Nonviolent Communication
Uh-huh.
extremely helpful for me in expressing, like, reducing my aggression in the way
Uh-huh.
that I
Uh-huh.
express. And another book called Getting the Love You Want, which has a like 90% of stuff I didn't really resonate with, but the way that they tell you to talk
Uh-huh.
feels extremely weird, but
Like
it
what? Like what is
is.
it? Like what are they telling you? What? Can you
So
give me an
one
example?
basically one person gets the floor and they express themselves, and the other person, their only job is to listen or ask clarifying questions and to
Uh-huh.
repeat back what you
Uh-huh.
hear. And
Uh-huh.
you basically do it point by point by point until
Yeah.
the speaker says, I can confirm that what you are saying back to me is exactly what I'm trying to communicate to you.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's so arduous to go through, but
Yeah.
when we and I this is not we do not use it regularly.
Uh-huh.
But when we have used it, I have found it worth the work and the awkwardness of talking in this extremely strange way.
Yeah.
And so those are. I'm just curious if there was anything you went through or any specific stuff that you and your partner to literally, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, be able to work together.
Yeah. Well, there are a few experiences, mostly in my work life, where I think I learned similar thing to what you're talking about. The process you're describing probably sounds familiar to Luke, the way I run meetings for teams. Um, the typical
Except
way
it's
you run a meeting.
CEOs and CTOs.
The typical way you're running meetings is like it's this free for everyone in the room. Okay, what do we do? Okay, we have this. Maybe we're going to brainstorm, quote unquote, and then there's going to be this free for all discussion that's basically going to be like people expressing their opinion for a long time. And I had some experiences in my life, but one of them was where I was I worked at a magazine for a short time as a writer and an editor, and the magazine, we would have these it was a monthly magazine, and we'd have, or probably weekly idea meetings for the monthly magazine. And at these meetings, the editor-in-chief, like the kind of the CEO, would sit at the front of this long conference table, and then everyone would be, his lieutenants would be right next to him, and then down the line to the peon, freelancer at the end. And he would say, "So, any ideas for the next issue?" And someone would come up with an idea. They'd raise their hand, and then some poor soul, they'd raise their hand, and then first lieutenants would start attacking why this was a horrible idea. It's a business magazine, and say, "Oh, Forbes did that last week," or and then gradually more people would come on, and then you'd say, "Okay, who has another idea?" And they're shaking. By the time of the third idea, everything's shut down, and nobody has any ideas. One time, they came around to me. One time he decided to go around, and everybody was in this everything. I said, "How about I just say my idea and nobody says anything? We just go on to the next person. And if you want to sign it, you could tell me." And he was so angry. He was like, "Man, this is the way it's been done at Time Mag." This was a lot of these people came from Time for decades and decades. Is you have an idea and then people like shoot it down and attack it, and the best idea is going to survive. And at the time, I was also taking improv classes, which is like the total opposite thing. Is when someone has an idea, your job is to make it better, show why that's a great idea, right? And you can't totally do that in a business meeting with you have to have a magazine to produce. So, but anyway, he cursed at me. I was pretty sure I was going to get fired. But then later on, he sent out an email. "Does anybody want to run the next idea meeting?" And of course, he knew I'd be in his office. And we came up with a process that's not very unlike what you just said, Mike, which was, okay, each person's getting a certain amount of time. All you can say is either nothing or clarifying questions. And then we had some other process stuff. And we got something like 10 times the number of ideas actually assigned to the magazine. Like I tracked it. But related to this is also that Never Split the Difference stuff. Have you read that book, Mike? The negotiating book? I think I see Luke shaking his head. Have you read that one, Luke?
Long time ago, but yeah.
That one reminded me. You reminded me of it, Mike, when you said like I have understood what you've said. Like I used to think that they have this phrase, active listening. I used to think active listening meant I'm sitting here and I'm looking like I'm listening. I'm staring at you and my eyebrows are kind of knit together a little bit in a serious way, and I look like I'm really paying attention. Which is not saying I'm not paying attention, but that's what active listening is. And yeah, I think what Voss has is summarizing back to the person their own story, and then not stopping until you hear some version of "that's right." Mm-hmm. And this would be the moment when everything shifts, like trust in a negotiation is built and the deal can now be done.
Yeah, the model that I found in a corporate setting comes from this book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, which was one of those watershed books for me. That is very similar to what you guys are talking about. It's called A Clearing Conversation. Mm-hmm. And
What's that?
It's basically the same thing with a little bit more scaffolding, where you have somebody in the seat who is the sharer, you have somebody who is the listener, and it has a little bit more scaffolding. It starts with what were the facts. So it's basically the prompt is, you talk as if it was a video recording, so there was no editorial comment. Do you understand the facts?
Mm-hmm.
Then
so do you use this in your marriage?
There's been a couple times when literally I stormed out of a room with my wife, and 30 minutes later came back up with a printed out version of the clearing conversation. It was like, it ended up going pretty well.
Oh, good. Okay.
It was a life raft. We both needed the grip to hold on to in the gale force winds that were blowing.
I think sometimes never split the difference stuff works with my wife, but sometimes she's like, Don't do that. Never split the difference stuff with me. You know, she can kind of tell I'm doing it.
I only use that sort of approach when it's basically when there's been an attempt and a failure, and the failure is pretty spectacular. Mm-hmm. I then come back with we've tried. So Andy, where we often like to wrap up our podcast is a question of, if you had one piece of advice for somebody who is about to be a dad or somebody who's a new dad, what would that piece of advice be?
If at all possible, get someone to be to take care of the kid at night for a while. Even if it's like a week, someone who can, it just takes so much out of you. And whatever parental, paternity leave, maternity leave you have, it's usually just not enough. And it could be a family member. In our case, so I used to be a Japanese translator. So I took this side job of Japanese translation to pay for a night nanny to be there for a week or two. And it was so great. Partly for me, but especially for my wife, because other things
I can imagine
happening,
Awesome. Well, Andy, I want to thank you so much. We've covered a ton of ground.
That's the only question. Wait, I feel like that's kind of like luxury advice. Like, not everybody can do that. So
you can do a redo, or you can do and also
a number 2.
I feel like that's
what would be your 2.0?
They're so expensive. That's why I had to do this extra thing. It's crazy. Oh, and by the way, do you want to? Okay,
I mean, you're not going to be taking a vacation that 6 months or that year, so move the vacation money to the nighttime.
Yeah. If at all possible to move, and you're thinking about it, do it. Although I got to tell you, with our night nanny, she had this very strict belief about how often to feed the kid. So I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was we were feeding the kid very frequently a little bit, and she thought it should be not very frequently a lot. And you have these, I don't know if you have these feeding logs for the kid. We used to do this. We had you write down we gave him this much milk at this time of day, and she would come at night and she'd see the logs and she'd be like, oh my God, you guys are totally messing up here. And for a while it was just sort of an annoyance, but then one time she called our doctor. We went to the doctor, and he's like, "Oh, we heard from your night nanny that." So, and especially my wife was very insecure about this. And so eventually we basically decided to cook the books. So we started creating fake logs of the feeding logs that showed, according to the pattern she thought was good, a lot, infrequently. And then she would come over and she's like, "Oh yeah, I can tell he's so much more energetic now." Great, yeah. So we cooked the books. So maybe that's my other thing is, if you do have a night nanny or one of these people, cook the books if they give you any hassle.
I'm taking the advice that perform at least one grand heist with your partner as a form of bonding around your child.
Right.
Well, with that, Andy, appreciate you so much for your time. We covered a ton of ground. I had a ton of fun. I hope you had a ton of fun. And
this was the most fun podcast I've gotten to be on, so thanks.
Before you bounce, I have a quick favor. Please subscribe to the pod. Not only does Luke love juicing those numbers, but it really does help put this thing in front of more dads.
And Mike, on the other hand, just loves juicing. We also now run a listener community on WhatsApp. To join, visit dadpod.fm, and you'll see the delicious link at the top of the homepage.
Come on in, baby. We'd love to have you.